Let my coworker, struggling with divorce, move in with his daughters, fell in love, kissed him, now avoiding work. I messed up by letting my coworker move in. I'm a widow, 38 years old. I lost my husband 10 years ago, and after the grief and emptiness threatened to swallow me whole, I decided it was time for a change. I requested a transfer in my career, packed up the pieces of my shattered life, and moved to a different state. Selling our home brought me a tidy profit. I bought myself a good-sized 4-bedroom house, thinking maybe a new foundation could help me lay some new roots. 7 years have passed here. I never really dated. Sure, there were a few coffee dates here and there, but nothing that ever made me even consider removing my wedding ring. I know it sounds kind of sad, all this time, and I never let go of that symbol, but it just felt right to keep wearing it. After losing my husband, I was hit with another blow, uterine cancer. It left me infertile, and that sealed something inside me. I decided to coast through life, alone. That's when Jason, not his real name, started at my workplace, a year ago now. He was quiet at first, dealing with the tail end of a nasty divorce. I learned his parents lived close by, planning to sell their place and chase warmer weather, but not until year's end. He struggled with skyrocketing rent and housing, and I could see the exhaustion on him. So I offered him a bedroom in my home. But he hesitated. Jason had 2 little girls, 6 and 7. His soon-to-be ex-wife wanted everything but them. She was willing to sign over their custody entirely in exchange for their house. After talking it through, I told him I could open my home to the 3 of them. 30 days, a trial period just to help them out. But here's where everything started to change. Those 30 days turned into 9 months. I didn't expect it, but my house filled up with life, shrieks, laughter, footsteps pounding in the hallway, the sound of breakfast chatter and bedtime giggles. It was amazing. Somewhere along the way, I fell completely in love with Jason and his girls. The echoing silence that once threatened to suffocate me was replaced with a warmth I hadn't felt since my wedding day at 18. But fear held me tight. I tried desperately to quell these feelings, to stuff them into busy weekends, throw myself back into the dating world, to no avail. Nothing compared. After every disappointing coffee, I ended up at home, heart aching more than ever. Last month, Jason told me his parents were finally ready. They'd be moving by the end of the year. He and his daughters would have their own place. He told me, a little sheepish, that he'd finally be out of my hair. I congratulated him. I even threw myself into helping pack their things and talking about how we'd decorate the girls' new bedrooms. Last weekend, they finally moved out. That's when everything spiraled. On their last night, I cooked an enormous goodbye dinner. Those girls climbed into Jason's car with wide, excited eyes. I hugged him, too long, I'm sure. We both went in for a cheek kiss and missed. I ended up kissing him. And he kissed me back. We didn't stop, not until one of his girls shrieked "You." From the back seat. My whole world spun. Flustered, I mumbled for him to leave his key under the mat when he was ready and closed the door. He knocked, wanted to talk, but I couldn't bring myself to face him. I'd already planned to take the week off for Christmas and started dodging every call, every text. My voicemail is clogged with his messages. Tuesday, back to work, I know I'll see him again, and I'm dreading every second. Update 1. Trust me, if my life ever gets turned into a Hallmark special, the last person who'd play me is Candace Cameron Bure or Leanne Rimes. I'm not a dainty blonde who melts at piercing blue eyes and a dazzling white smile. I've got black hair, and there's no way you'd call me delicate. And about Jason, he's got brown eyes, not blue. My late husband had green eyes, if that matters, but really, none of this is fiction. It's tough for me to explain the way things unfolded, but I'll try. My husband and I were meant to be together. Since nursery school we'd been by each other's side. I fell in love with him long before I even understood what love was, and that feeling never faded. We married at 18 and 19, ready to conquer everything together. We dreamed up a future, we bought a house, set career goals, even mapped out retirement plans. When I lost him, it felt like someone had cut my lifeline. No matter how much time I had with him, it would never have been enough. I had what everyone searches for and what everyone deserves, to have it ripped away. Just imagine how unfair that is. After plenty of heavy thinking, and some heavy drinking, I realized that having Jason here was eerie, like living the life I was supposed to have. I should have my husband here. I should have 2 kids, filling the house with laughter, noise, messes, sibling spats, chaos and joy. I should be living my life, but with Jason, it always felt off, like I'd gotten the details wrong. He wasn't my 6'2", green-eyed menace of a soulmate. And while I adore Jason's daughters, they aren't ours. I mourn my husband, but sometimes I think I grieve even more for the life we were robbed of. Betty White once said, after her husband died, that she refused to date or remarry because she'd already had the best, and nothing would ever compare. That's me. Nothing could ever measure up to my husband, and right now, I don't want to even try. I laid all of this out for Jason. After reading through his avalanche of texts, him pleading to talk, saying we shared something he didn't want to lose, getting angry when I went silent, apologizing for that anger, eventually just asking if we could go back to being friends, I finally called him. I told him everything, what I just wrote here, and even more that I keep private. I told him he was getting divorced and I'm not some rebound to help ease the transition. His marriage wasn't even a year cold, and coupled with my own insecurities about measuring anyone against my past, it just wouldn't be healthy to start anything right now, especially not with him. As much as I think I might have fallen in love with him, I need to figure out if I'm really falling for him, or if I'm just longing for the life I was destined for. He got it, thankfully. He even agreed that maybe he was rushing into something we couldn't handle yet. He asked if we could still be friends, and honestly, I jumped at the chance. I missed him. I missed the girls. I missed having some purpose instead of just drifting by. When he asked if I'd come over for Christmas, I said yes right away, bought gifts for the girls from me and Santa and told him I'd swing by after the girls fell asleep. He seemed relieved. I made him promise not to spoil the surprise, and we agreed we'd finally have a face-to-face, grown-up talk, one that a phone call could never handle. He joked about slipping the girls a Benadryl/NyQuil chaser just to make sure they slept through the night. I think he was joking, at least. So that's the update. Jason and I are in this limbo, friends-ish, and I'm seeing him tonight. I'm more nervous than I was on prom night. But hey, I communicated. I put on my big girl trousers. They're scratchy, uncomfortable, and I'll probably end up with a rash, but they're on. Back in November 2021, my family and I made a big move to a neighborhood closer to my aging parents. My parents are in their 70s, and I could see time wearing on them. My wife wasn't enthused, but our 2 kids were delighted at the prospect of more time with their grandparents. For a while, I kept up a grueling commute to my old job until I managed to land a transfer nearby. That's when the trouble started. Turns out, my wife had reignited an old flame. Apparently, that's why she'd been so resistant to the move. She began cheating. Just 3 months into my new job, she hit me with a triple whammy. She wanted a divorce, wanted the house, and wanted to sign over the kids. Her boyfriend had kids of his own and they were all set to blend families in our home. I found myself living in my parents' cramped house, with just one spare bedroom to share. The rest was piled with their odds and ends. For a while, my kids stayed with their mom, but the arrangement was always meant to be temporary until I could find at least a place with 2 bedrooms. My parents didn't hold back. They told me they planned to sell or give me the house by year's end. I just had to make some kind of move before then. Rent was astronomical. Then my soon-to-be ex-wife upped the ante. Her new boyfriend and his kids were moving in now, and apparently, our kids weren't blending well with the crowd. To keep the peace, she agreed to a quick divorce. If she kept the house, she'd sign over her parental rights to me. At work, I'd struck up a friendship with Hope. The day finally came when I had to confess to her my desperate need to find a new home for my kids and me. She offered her place. Curious, I asked if her husband wouldn't mind, and she told me she didn't have one anymore. All this time, she'd worn a wedding ring, but it turns out her husband had died a decade ago. She just never stopped wearing the ring, and until then I just assumed she was married. So my kids and I moved in with Hope, and for the first time in a long while, life felt magical. I saw this woman, warm, beautiful, compassionate, in a light I'd never noticed before. My kids adored her. She never said a cross word about their mother. On her days off, she'd make them breakfast, lunch, and dinner. She'd take them out to do girl things, activities I couldn't begin to figure out. When I was too busy to buy the girls' school clothes, she did it without a second thought. Hope just seemed so genuinely happy to have us around, almost like we filled a gap in her own life. The day I finally got my parents' house was the day I made a big misstep. In a rush of emotion, I kissed her. She freaked out, asked me to drop my key off later, and hurried inside. I tried texting and calling, but got nothing for a whole week. When she finally answered, she explained she didn't want to be anyone's rebound, not mine, and not hers. She said I was fresh off a divorce, too raw, too soon. As much as I didn't want to admit it, she was right. I told her that, mostly to placate her, but inside? I didn't feel that way. Still, I invited her over for Christmas. She agreed because she'd bought gifts for my girls. She spent the night on my couch, hung out until after dinner, and my kids just lit up with her there. Now, they ask about her constantly. Work's been easy, almost back to normal. But I keep wanting more. I don't know if I should go for it, try dating again, or what. And yes, she dated a bit while we lived together, but nothing serious took root after that first try. It started out harmless enough, just 2 friends who met at work, grabbing coffee after a long shift or catching a movie when neither of us had plans. I kept telling myself that's all it was, 2 buddies hanging out, nothing more, but somewhere along the way, things started to change for me. Lately, I found myself looking forward to the next time I'll see her in a way that feels distinctly not platonic. When she texts me, I get this weird rush of anticipation, even if it's just to complain about traffic or send a meme. I catch myself replaying our conversations in my head, lingering on the way she laughs at my dumbest jokes or how her eyes brighten up when she talks about something she loves. It's getting hard to ignore. We went out last weekend, just dinner, nothing fancy. I told myself it was just another friendly meal. But sitting across from her, watching the candlelight bounce off her hair, I couldn't help but notice how beautiful she looked, and how easy it was to fall into deep, comfortable conversation. By the time we parted ways, I realized I didn't want the night to end. Now, every time we make plans, it feels less like two friends hanging out and more like, well, a date. I'm finding it harder and harder to see her as just a friend anymore. It's both exciting and terrifying because I don't know if she feels the same way, and I don't want to risk losing the friendship. But the line between friendship and something more is getting blurrier with every just coffee or just a movie, and I'm not sure how much longer I can pretend otherwise. Update 2. I spent Christmas Eve at Jason's place, and for hours, we talked in that quiet, half-lit way you only do, with someone you truly know. It was after 2 a.m. before we finally drifted to sleep on the couch together, surrounded by the warmth and the comfort of everything that used to be home. The girls woke us in the morning, and suddenly the day was full: breakfast, lunch, presents, and dinner with all the little joys and rituals that fill up a holiday. When I finally drove home that night, I thought maybe, just maybe, I had found a little closure, but afterward, I noticed Jason was glued to his phone more than usual. Eventually, he sat me down and admitted he'd downloaded a dating app, and to nobody's surprise, he had a hit. It shouldn't have shocked me how quickly it happened. Jason is drop-dead gorgeous, and he's always had that effortless, magazine cover kind of look, the kind of person you imagine casually stepping off a GQ page and making the world feel dull by comparison. He's also funny. Wicked smart, the kind of person who deserves clarity, not all this uncertainty that became a habit because I never took the time to figure out what I really wanted. When he asked if I'd babysit the girls so he could go out for a New Year's date, I had to say yes. If I'd said no after everything we talked about at Christmas, what would have been the point? So here I am now, alone on New Year's Eve, sitting in Jason's house, sipping his expensive wedding gift scotch I insisted on charging for my babysitting services. And all I can think about is him out there somewhere, ringing in the new year with someone else, and maybe finding happiness in a way I never gave a real chance. I deserve happiness, too. I know that. It's just hard to remember on nights like this, when the house is quiet and I've just tucked the girls in, knowing they'd never make it till midnight, anyway. So here's to tonight. I hope you get a kiss at midnight. I hope I do too, someday. Update 3. Long story short, I'm divorced. The papers were finalized just a couple of months ago. In the chaotic whirlwind of my divorce, I found myself, along with my 2 kids, crashing at my coworker Hope's place. We ended up staying for about 9 months, give or take. Hope was incredible to us. My kids adored her, and honestly, I felt the same way. Somewhere in the midst of it, I started thinking, hoping, that what she felt for me was more than friendship. I got swept up in those feelings. Right before I moved out to my own place, I kissed her. Let me tell you, big mistake. She didn't talk to me for a week. Straight up ghosted me. When she finally called, I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd moved past the awkwardness, especially after spending Christmas together. But things didn't really go back to what they were. Eventually, I decided not to pin my hopes on someone who didn't feel the same way. I jumped onto the dating apps and managed to line up a date for New Year's. I needed someone to watch my kids, so I asked Hope. She agreed and everything was set. I went out, had a great night, rolled back in at 3 a.m., and there was Hope, fast asleep on my sofa. I tossed a blanket over her, tucked myself into bed, and figured I'd make breakfast for her and my kids in the morning. But when I woke up, she was already gone. The next morning, I asked if she could keep an eye on my kids again while I tried to set up a second date. This time, she turned me down immediately. She said her sister and brother-in-law were coming over that week, and since her sister has 3 kids of her own, the house would be overwhelmed. She mentioned that with everyone there, she just didn't have the time or space to watch my kids. I got it, and just told her I'd figure out another solution. But then, today, something didn't add up. I saw Hope tagged in a sappy post, looked like it was from her sister. Out of curiosity, I checked that page, and sure enough, Hope's sister and her family are spending the next 3 weeks out of the country. Not with Hope. And Hope only has one sister, so there was no way she'd gotten her stories crossed. I confronted her, asked what was going on. She stammered, then did a full turnaround and said she'd watch my kids after all and to go ahead, set up that second date. When I pressed her about why she lied to me, she shut me down completely, told me to stop being an and reminded me that I got what I needed anyway. She was blunt, said she didn't have feelings for me the way I have for her. Now I keep wondering, was I wrong for even asking her again? Because I know full well she lied about her family just to avoid me, and the more I think about it, the more confused I get. Update 4. Not when I still wore a wedding ring from someone who left me, a tragedy I won't elaborate on, but trust me when I say it scarred me for a long time. That ring carried a message only I could hear: my heart and soul still belong to someone else, even when theirs no longer belong to me. I carried it like a talisman, an anchor, even as life moved on and everything else changed. It was my way of clinging to the past, of refusing to let go because I was scared of what would happen if I did. But then Dan came into my life. And everything started spinning. I needed to pour my feelings out somewhere, to make sense of this new storm inside my head. I needed to figure out why this man, Dan, made my entire world feel like it had flipped upside down just by existing in it. People told me to go for it. I kept resisting, clutching at my pearls with a no, I'm still a mourning widow, I can't even fathom taking my ring off. But the universe has a tricky way of shoving you right where you need to be, especially when you're not looking. Then came Christmas morning. He was in my kitchen making breakfast, and I walked in, bleary and uncaffeinated, expecting for the tiniest moment to see my husband. But no. There was Dan, turning to greet me with a smile so wide it nearly split his face. Not my husband's smirk, not those green eyes, but a whole new smile, all teeth, pure joy, and warmth radiating from his very bones. Seriously, Dan, that smile, your girls were lucky to inherit it and, blessedly, you have good dental. That's when it slammed into me, I was wrong. I was so wrong. My illusions about protecting my heart? Gone. I wasn't prepared to feel this. I wasn't ready to lose my grip on the only security I had left, my old grief, my steadfast sadness. But pain is stubborn, and so is jealousy. When Dan asked me to watch the girl so he could have a second date, my stomach twisted in pure agony, a feeling I'd buried for so long. Sure, I'd told him to move forward. And sure, it made sense. But when he did, while I stayed stuck, I was furious. I tried to cover it up with some nonsense about my sister visiting, but Dan saw right through me. He called me out, gently but firmly, "You're lying. Just be honest." Infuriated, I snapped back, saying I'd watch the girls, just give me the time. He told me to come for breakfast so we could talk it out, like grown-ups, like we're desperately trying to become. That night, something else snapped into place. Late, he called me over and over. I ignored it, until finally, I picked up and barked at him for waking me, only for him to say, "You named me after your cat?" And yes, I did. My cat, Jason, is a seal point, alarmingly large, and stares at me like he's plotting my doom, and I adore him. So we talked, long into the night. He wanted to see me, really see me, but refused to leave his girls alone so late. He asked if I could take a personal day, I hesitated, then agreed to come over if I could stay the night. So there I was, pajamas, ridiculous pink bear claw slippers, extra clothes, and a full feeder for Jason. We talked until 3 in the morning. He said he'd take a personal day, and this time, I agreed, heart pounding with something like fear and anticipation and longing all rolled together. When I moved for blankets, he stopped me and asked if I could try sleeping in the same bed. The usual stipulations: he'd stay on the covers, I'd be under, he'd wear clean underwear, on and on. To my own shock, I agreed. And then, unexpectedly and irrationally, I started crying. Not quiet tears, either, sobs. He held me, confused but comforting, the way someone does when they don't understand but know you need it. That was the first time I was held because I had to be. Then, because I wanted to be. Then, because, I realized, he simply wanted to hold me. And that's when I fell in love, fiercely, blindingly, honestly in love. I had never really known what falling in love felt like. My husband and I, we were born loving each other, we never had this transition, this wild, chest-stamping, fluttering evolution of friendship into need. This was brand new, and terrifying. I've been on roller coasters less stressful than this. But Dan and I, we agreed to take it one day at a time. Setbacks were inevitable. We'd need to keep it secret from the girls, for now. I was even transferring departments for the sake of discretion. But here's the point, we're doing this. I'm really, truly in love with him. I have been, I just never recognized it for what it was. It feels like floating, like I was doing everything not to sink, and then when I met his girls, I had no choice but to drown and finally be at peace. I picked up my big girl trousers, ready for absolutely anything, and I will never stop grinning at how much he still can't believe I named him after my cat. I love my cat, too. There's that. And there's us. Update 5. I'm divorced, with 2 kids. My ex-wife wanted nothing to do with them as she started her new life, she didn't want them as part of her future. That made the divorce quick, but it broke my heart. She moved on with her new man and his kids, I moved on with an incredible girlfriend who I love, and, more importantly, my kids adore her too. For a long time, I honestly believed I'd never hear from my ex again. She signed over her parental rights and told me, point blank, to lose her number, to erase her from our lives entirely. The worst pain was slowly pulling my kids away from everything mother-related, especially when they kept asking about her, wanting her. But that's how it played out. My kids have been in therapy since we moved out and, despite everything, they're adjusting really well. My girlfriend being an absolute saint helps a ton, too. Then, this past weekend, my ex showed up at my house, completely out of the blue, wanting to talk. When she rang the doorbell, my kids, curious and unsuspecting, ran to open it. The moment they saw her, silence. They just stood there until I walked into the room. My ex stood at my door, visibly pregnant, rubbing her belly, grinning at us. She told me she's due in about 8 weeks with a girl. For anyone wondering, no, it isn't mine. It's her new man's child. I asked my daughters to head to the back of the house and to bring my girlfriend out. They didn't even hug their mom, they just walked away. My ex tried to say something, but I told her to wait until my girlfriend was by my side. Once my girlfriend joined me, my ex asked how I'd been. I told her to cut the small talk and get to the point. That's when she dropped it, Her parents want to come down and help with the new baby, but there isn't enough room in their house with her man and his kids, and another infant on the way. She asked if her parents could stay with me instead, suggesting I move my daughters into one room so her parents could take the other. I shut that down immediately and told her to leave. She started begging, saying she'd have to raise the new baby alone since her man has to work extra shifts to support everyone, and she'll have no help unless her parents can stay here. I told her, in no uncertain terms, that none of that is my problem, and I closed the door. When I went to check on my kids in the back of the house, I found them quietly sniffling. My girlfriend took them out for a while, and I just stayed behind and fumed. Now my girlfriend wants to have a talk about all this, and it's obvious she isn't happy. From the little she shared, it honestly sounds like she's considering letting my ex's parents stay, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. We haven't even been together a year, and suddenly I'm dealing with this madness. I'm just trying to move forward with my life, make sure my kids are okay, and now I've got this to deal with. For what it's worth, my girlfriend and I live separately. She has her own place, so at the end of the day, she can't exactly decide what happens at mine. I just needed to get all this off my chest. Update 6. I don't know what possessed me, exactly, love, foolishness, or that itchy itch in my bones that tells me to do the hard thing even when it would be so much easier to slam the door and deadbolt it twice. I asked Dan to make coffee and meet me at my kitchen table. I put my dead husband's ring on the wood between us like a tiny moon, and told him I wanted to talk about his ex's parents. He braced for a fight. I surprised him. I told him I didn't want anyone in his house, least of all people who would make the girls feel intruded upon. That home is finally theirs, safe, quiet, exactly as big or small as they need it. But I also told him I couldn't shake the feeling that the girls shouldn't have to lose their grandparents just because their mother set the whole board on fire. The solution wasn't to invite chaos inside his walls. The solution, if there was one, could be a door that only opened when we chose. A schedule. A neutral ground. Maybe my house. He stared at me like I'd just casually offered to foster raccoons. He told me he would not use me to clean up his ex's messes. I told him I wasn't a mop. I'm a woman with a spare bedroom, an overfed cat, and a stubborn streak that gets me into trouble and occasionally out of it. So I called the therapist. Not because I needed permission, but because I wanted rules. She gave me language, supervised, predictable, time-limited. No mother present. No surprises. No sleepovers. And then Dan called the grandparents while I sat there, heart in my throat, listening to a woman cry through the phone like someone had finally let her exhale. We set a 30-minute meet at the park. If the girls balked or cried, we were done. If they wanted to sit 2 benches away and remember how to say hello, that would be enough. On Saturday, I braided hair with shaking hands. The girls let me. Dan folded and refolded a picnic blanket, then left it on the chair because the therapist had said don't make a picnic out of it. Keep it light, she'd said. Say yes to small things. So we drove to the park with empty hands. They were there early. The grandmother had her hair set like she was going to church. The grandfather wore the same windbreaker as every nice man who has ever said pumpkin at a produce stand. They didn't come at us. They didn't call out. They stood up and put their hands in their pockets so they wouldn't reach. The girls froze, then drifted toward them like 2 wary deer. The grandpa asked if he could sit on the ground so he'd be smaller. He did. He told them he missed them, very softly, like he was afraid of breaking the air. The grandmother didn't cry. She blinked a lot and kept swallowing like the lump in her throat was a thing with elbows. We were making it. We were doing the exact hard, surgical thing and it wasn't going to bleed out on us. And then their daughter waddled across the mulch. It was like watching a spark travel a fuse. 1 second, quiet. The next, noise, her voice, bright and too loud, calling their names with a grin that thought it was welcome everywhere. The grandparents went gray. Dan stepped forward so instinctively I'll see it in slow motion the rest of my life, shoulders square, hand up, that absolutely not coming from his whole body. The girls were held between bolting and clinging. I took their hands. We turned. We walked. We drove away while she yelled our names. My hands shook on the wheel. I told the girls I was proud of them for leaving with us. Dan sat in the back seat and didn't talk. He put his palm on the headrest like he needed to keep the car anchored to the road. At my house, the cat did what cats do, judged us from a higher vantage point and then demanded dinner. The girls cried a little, hiccuped a lot, then curled against me on the couch and watched a baking show until their eyes went glassy and soft. The doorbell rang once, twice, and then stopped. We let it. Later, the grandmother called. She didn't defend her daughter. She said they'd turned off location sharing months ago, and she still found them, and she was sorry, so sorry. She asked if she could mail the girls a letter instead, so they would know she could follow rules. That she understood no surprises meant no surprises. Dan said yes to a letter. That was all. He didn't say much after that, not even when the house went quiet. He followed me to my bedroom with his socked feet whispering on the floor and sat on the edge of my bed like a teenager asking for something he knew he shouldn't. Can I just be here? He asked. You don't have to talk. I just need to be where you are. I reached for my ring. You'd think it would be a performance, the taking off, the speech, the decorative flourish. It wasn't. I slid it off and didn't put it back on and didn't make a eulogy out of it. I put it in the little blue bowl on my dresser where I keep bobby pins and foreign coins and a button that doesn't belong to any of my clothes. Then I climbed into bed with a man who is not my husband but is my love, who breathed into my hair like he was reminding himself he still could. I didn't cry. Neither did he. We just lay there and let the quiet be exactly the shape it was. Sunday morning, the letter arrived like she'd been standing outside the post office when we hung up. It was short. It said, "We were wrong, we will not be wrong again. We would like to be your grandparents if you want us," and it ended with their phone number written twice, as if one of the numbers might get lost on the way to the girls and the other could still make it. The girls read it at the kitchen counter while the cat's tail flicked like a metronome. They didn't say yes. They didn't say no. They asked if they could draw a picture in return. They drew themselves as stick figures holding balloons. The therapist would probably say it meant something beautiful. I just taped it into an envelope with my heart in my throat and a stamp slightly crooked because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Then the universe tossed something else into the mix. Dan's ex went into labor 3 weeks early. The call came mid-afternoon when the girls were constructing a fort out of my throw blankets. I heard one half of it, the frantic, breathless half, and watched the way Dan's jaw set like he was swallowing a dozen different words. He hung up and said he was going to the hospital. Not to hold hands, not to be in a room that had nothing to do with him anymore, but to make sure the grandparents had a ride, had a plan, had anything but our doorstep as their only option. He asked if he could drop the girls here and if I could keep them overnight. He looked so ashamed of needing that I wanted to shake him. "They're fine here," I said. "Go." He went. The grandparents texted me from the waiting room a picture of 2 styrofoam cups and wrote, "We will not come by. We will not bring her. Thank you." I microwaved mac and cheese, and we made a welcome to the world card for a baby girl the girls may or may not meet in 5 or 10 or 18 years. They picked stickers with stars. I wrote, "You are loved. You don't have to know it yet." Dan came back past midnight smelling like hospital air and vending machine coffee, with news I wasn't sure mattered to anyone but the part of me that still prays for tidy endings. Mother and baby were healthy. The grandparents had a motel room. No one had darkened our doorstep. He stood in my kitchen and exhaled like he hadn't since the park. "I don't want them to be homeless," he said. "I don't want them in my girls' bedrooms. I want boundaries that feel kinder than the ones I grew up with and stronger than the ones that let us blow apart." "Then let me be the porch light," I said. "They can stay here for 3 nights. That's it. They don't come to your house. They don't see the girls unless the girls choose it and the therapist says it's okay. They keep us out of the drama, or they go sleep in their car. We can do this like grown-ups, or not at all." He looked at my stupid pink bear slippers like they were a gavel and then looked at me. "I love you," he said, as if he'd tripped and the truth fell out. I felt it land. It didn't break anything. "I love you, too," I said, and tasted the difference. Not old grief, not a half-life. Just love, clean and bright in present tense. The grandparents came on Tuesday with 1 rolling suitcase and a box of Tupperware that smelled like cinnamon. They didn't cross the line at the doorway until I said the word. They took off their shoes. They asked where to set their things. The grandfather fixed the wobbly leg on my dining chair without being asked. The grandmother met my cat and called him handsome, which he accepted because he is vain and believes compliments are owed to him by birthright. At dinner, we talked about weather and recipes and the appropriate number of photos to take of a newborn. Annoying answer. All of them. When the girls decided to pop over the following day for an hour after school, we did it like a military exercise. Car to couch, couch to coloring books to car. The girls lasted 20 minutes and then asked to go, and we said okay. We are figuring it out. We are floor taping the edges of our lives and moving carefully between them, and no one is bleeding out. We took the girls for donuts on Friday morning and told them, officially, the thing they've known since forever. That we are together. That we kiss sometimes, but not in front of them because they've made their feelings on that very clear. One of them said ew on principle, the other asked if we could all get chocolate milk. Both said okay like it was a weather report that they'd already predicted on their own. I don't know what comes next. Courts and therapists and babies that have nothing to do with us except for the way everything touches everything else if you trace it far enough. I know this, though, my ring is in a blue bowl. My house has become a harbor. His has stayed a fortress, and that's right, the girls are building forts out of blankets again as I write this, designing entrances that require passwords and one very complicated handshake. Dan is in my kitchen, smiling that too wide smile that makes me forgive the entire world for being messy and stupid and unkind. And somewhere across town, there is a brand new person screaming her way into a life she didn't ask for. If she can do it, maybe we can, too. Maybe the trick is to scream for a minute and then let yourself be held. Maybe that's all any of us are doing.